Strong Dads wants to thank Quality Auto Mart for joining us as a sponsor. Quality Auto Mart was born in 1985. They are owned and operated by Mark and Nancy Repke. Quality Auto Mart provides all the services, repairs, and maintenance for your vehicle's needs with a 3-year auto parts and labor warranty. They offer complimentary vehicle safety inspection and estimates. Also, they offer a shuttle service, and the 4th oil change is always on them. They are located at 7307 on State Road 46 in Batesville, Indiana. Make sure you give them a call at 812-934-2301. All right. Hey, guys, what's going on? Welcome back to Strong Dads here. Hope you guys are out there having a good week here. Joined with Merle. We're here back live action. We're doing another show.
We're live. Wait, are we live? Well, those of you watching, no, we're not live, but we are.
We're live right now.
Today we're live.
Yeah. Anyways, how you doing, Merle?
I'm good. I'm pretty good.
Yeah.
Just doing our thing, man. I'm thinking about last week's show.
Yeah.
So we're really just jumping right into this week's. Last week was, our title is Power plus Control equals Abuse. Mm-hmm. And so we kind of went through the whole ideas of what abuse looks like and, having some pretty good feedback from that.
Yeah,
and when
absolutely.
I say pretty good, not always good in the sense of, man, I'm starting to see that maybe that's happening in my relationship or I'm guilty or whatever. And I think that's the reason why we did the show. Yeah. So, which leads us into why today, this is part 2, why this is really equally, if not more important,
yep.
because we called out last time on speaking to Strong Dads that the 76% of the perpetrators are male.
Yep, absolutely.
And so we just have to call that what it is. It doesn't mean that we don't have women who are abusers and controllers, but men predominantly do this. And so today we really want to go after what if you are the guy who, and we're going to use the word today, abuser and or controller, because abuse, we get that picture in our mind that is automatically like slamming people's heads
Physical
against
aspect.
the wall and stuff like that. And that's, as we talked last week, that's really not what is most typical. What's most typical is this hyper sense of controlling to the point where it oppresses the people around you. And so if you just use the word abusers, half the people shut the show down, right? Because they're like, well, that's not me. And the idea here is ultimately the deal here does go around control. And if you have excessive unhealthy control, you have a level of oppression. And that's what shuts people down and holds people back. And you can only do that so long, and eventually people kind of die on the vine. I'm not even the person I used to be. So we're going to be using the word controller and abuser. We're going to be kind of using that interchangeably. And I just think it's important that you understand that not all abuse is physical.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I like it. I think it'll be a good show. We're going to really kind of dive into the now what, right? We've recognized some of the patterns that we see with the people who are in control and the abuser. We're going to move into the now what. Before we do, let's thank our sponsor real quick, so that way we give lots of time for our show. So Strong Dad, we would love to thank Quality Auto Mart for coming alongside of us, a new sponsor for us. So really do appreciate them. Check them out. Let them know Strong Dad sent you down there. You can for sure you can give them a call at 812-934-2301. They got a great service department there. So let them know we really do appreciate them.
Yeah, Mark and Nancy, new to our sponsorship, so Thank those guys. Also want to thank Casey's Outdoor Solutions for being one of our sponsors of Strong Dads podcast. Casey has got so many cool things down in that gift shop. So go down there, whether you're talking about some home decor, whether you're talking about landscaping, whatever it is for your home, check out Casey's Outdoor Solutions. I'm sure he can help you out.
Like it.
Okay, so again, like we said, we're talking about power plus control equals abuse, and we're trying to do something that is educational and hopefully encouraging. We've said many times before, we really don't want to be a show that's all about complaining about a situation.
Yep, absolutely.
We really want to be, okay, let's state the situation, but what do we do to move through it? And so even more so than last week hopefully was helping the victim start to see more like, oh, wow, I don't need to second guess myself anymore. This stuff is happening in my marriage. Or even even the controller or abuser going, oh, yeah, that kind of sounds like me.
Yeah.
Okay. So now we move into, okay, so how do we help the person who is the perpetrator, who is the controller, who is the abuser? Like, how do we help them? Because we can get the victim help, and we have to do that. We need to always have that handout to do it. But if you don't get the abuser, controller identified, and if they don't get help and see their way, they'll just continue to do it. It'll just move to the next relationship. Mm-hmm. And, the amount of damage that's done in a person's lifetime, I mean, they can go through 2 and 3 different marriages, all of the different encounters they have in those relationships. There's a lot of abuse that can take place in a person's lifetime if they don't get it under control.
Yep. Merle, this kind of was making me think about, I think one of the first steps, obviously, we kind of pointed out some different things, some different behaviors that kind of lead into this idea of controlling someone else. And I think, as we move forward to now, what do we do? Man, if anything that we said last week, kind of hit a nerve or kind of struck something, inside you that you were like, man, that's me. Man, I think you have just established the first part, and that is the recognition. I think there has to be a self-recognition that you have some of these qualities, some of these traits that we talked about, because if you're not willing to recognize that is you, then you're obviously always going to continue to put up the defenses, kind of like we were talking about before the show, like doubling down them. Mm-hmm. Man, I think the first part of this is you have to personally recognize that you have some abusive, some controlling nature within you. And man, that could stem back from when you were a kid.
Yeah, we're going to talk a little bit about that.
Yeah,
whole
absolutely.
idea, like, not to ever say like, this is not your fault.
Yes.
No, we're all about ownership.
Yes.
But there could be things that, helped fertilize this and grow in you and brought out the ugly thing that you're now trying to deal with. Sure, yeah.
And I want you to speak on this, Big, obviously, because of the work that you and Linda do. As we move, hopefully, past the point you've recognized that there is a problem. I think sometimes in a lot of ways have taken that first, the hardest step of actually, there is something. I'm taking the blame for this. Moving into this next step, man, what are some of your recommendations? Obviously, with again, yours and Linda's job, the field that you're in as far as coaching people. Mm-hmm. Let's talk a little bit about this counseling, and this coaching of these situations.
Yeah. Well, our conversation today is not going to be a step 1, step 2, step 3.
Right.
Okay. It's there's not going to be like a sequential order to this. All right. And it's going to be more just talking points about things to be aware of, mm-hmm. right? So I think one thing that we have to realize is that, and this is more like for the victim to understand this, because this is so frustrating for them, and they want the whole situation to get better. But a controlling personality is seldom able to be helped by their victim. Okay, in other words, like if you're the wife and you're being victimized, you probably are not going to have it within you to help this person, especially initially. Mm. In other words, you're not going to be the person that calls the other person out and says, "Hey, you're a controller, you're an abuser, and I'm going to help you get through it." No, because you are the person that are loading up triggers all the time. In other words, just your mere presence triggers the person into a controlling behavior. Mm. And so that's frustrating, but what it means is you probably aren't going to be the helper here, all right? And so oftentimes when you're trying to help the abuser, the controller, when you're trying to help them, they're going to have to be spoken to by somebody outside of the immediate group, okay? So maybe a counselor, a pastor, a good friend, somebody who can kind of call them out, somebody who is somewhat emotionally neutral in this situation, which in marriages, there's not this emotional neutrality. It's I have my side, you have your side, and as soon as you say something, my hair stands up, right? Yep. So you have to realize, all right, maybe there's going to have to be some outside intervention that comes into play here.
Well, so then a follow-up question I would have, so, if you are listening, if you're tuning in and you feel as though you are, on the other side of the abuse or the control, so you find yourself more in the victim, mindset, just what you're saying before of kind of, you can't be the one that's going to push someone into that realm as far as getting outside help. What type of role does that person then play? Because I don't want them just to feel like, oh, I can't help in this situation at all. So what would you recommend that person, in this instance, we are talking to men. So what would you recommend the spouse, the female part, what would you recommend for them?
So the victim, and this is where you help, okay? And it doesn't feel like help at all, but this is where you help, okay? So the victim has to come in and set hard limits and boundaries.
Okay.
Okay. In other words, they've remember, this is all about control. And so the abuser or the controller is always trying to find, especially the areas that they have the greatest significant power in, they're going to be doubling down on those and grabbing those. Okay. And so if you're the victim, you have to rise up and you have to set firm boundaries on what it is that you're going to protect moving forward. Okay. And this is not negotiable. Okay, so again, here's what we're giving some advice here, some help to the person who is the victim, where you finally stand up and you say, listen, from now on, we're not going to talk about this subject, or this is not how you're going to spend the money, or you're going to spend the time, okay? Now, you have to be prepared to know that when you lay down those strong boundaries, it's probably not going to go well. Right. And it doesn't go well unless you have the person, the controller, who has finally come to his knees.
Yeah.
But until he does that, they're going to really double down on you, and it's going to get messy. So when you go to set hard, strong boundaries, you will not talk to me that way anymore. You will no longer control the checkbook like you are doing. You will no longer tell me when I can and can't be with this person or that person. Okay, so when you lay those boundaries, you better know what your possible things are that outcomes, you can do, your outcomes that you would run up against. Like, is this going to get violent? Am I going to have to go to a safe place? Do I have to have a backup? Do I have to have a separate savings account of some sort? If he shuts down all my money, am I going to have a backup? So, but the key here is strong boundaries have to be set. Now, let me bring myself in as the third party. Okay. And so if I am the counselor, if I'm the coach in the situation, and the couple comes to me, okay, as I said before, I'm not emotionally attached. And so right off the bat, I'm laying that when I recognize that we have a controlling, abusive situation going on here, I will come in and lay down the boundaries. From now on, I want, a lot of times we use physical separation. Many times. Okay, I want you two separated.
Really?
I want you separated because we can't, it's too messy on so many different levels to keep them in the same house. And even if we agree in front of the counselor that we're going to do these things, all of a sudden 24 hours, 48 hours later, life goes kind of back to the way it was, and we get sucked right back into our old patterns. And so you have to put space, and so physical space in there. And man, that's a disruption to a home, right?
Yeah.
I mean, that's a disruption, especially if we have kids and everything. But we have to have some physical space where we really are going, wow, this is real. Yeah. Like we really are doing something different. But so those are strong boundaries and limits. And as the neutral party here, as a counselor, I'm going to lay them out. And this is not negotiable. Yeah. Okay, I'm not and oftentimes this is where I'll get kickback from the controller. Well, but I'll agree to this, but what if no. And the reason why this is so hard is because they're controlling. Yeah. And now they're having to relinquish a level of control that they have grabbed onto for many years and in different practices. So this is our very first push. Okay. And there's no middle ground. Yeah. All right. Somebody else has to take control, and that person has to practice this crazy word that we have in the Christian life called submission. Man, how often do we struggle with submitting to Christ?
Yeah.
Right. And this is where this starts to practice.
Yep.
We have to submit.
Man, as you're talking, Merle, I'm just, trying to not necessarily play devil's advocate, but kind of also see, because I think in a lot of ways that the person who is feeling controlled feels like they have lost all control. And this idea of actually speaking up and saying enough is enough, right? And man, I think if there was ever something worth fighting for, it has to be your marriage. I mean, if we're talking about this, man, it has to be worth it. And I don't know what it's like. I'm not going to pretend to know what it's like to feel, utter, powerless, that you have no control. But man, I would just encourage you, it has to be worth sticking up for yourself, but also for your marriage. And I think when it comes to this, I think there's a right and a wrong way to do this, right? I think, doing it in a respectful manner, but also respecting yourself, because there has to be a level of self-respect where you're just like, enough is enough. I have to do this, or, I'm going to be just miserable, right? So I think, when you do start to set those boundaries and you do start to speak up, I think having a respectful tone to your voice, doing it in a way in which hopefully lands well. Again, if we are talking, at someone who is in a controlled mindset, I think there's definitely a balance there. But man, I think doing it in a respectful way, I think, making sure, just like you were saying, the different outcomes, hopefully, safety is of your a concern for yourself, that God forbid this turns violent. I can, I have the ability to, ensure my safety if there's kids involved, and ensure the kids' safety as well. Man, if anything we talked about in the last show kind of struck a chord with you, and you find yourself and you've kind of recognized some abusive and controlling behavior, man, I would encourage you to find and seek out accountability. I really would. This is something I have found in my walk with Christ, that having other guys, not saying that counselors and coaches they obviously have a time and a place for sure, 100%. I think having a trusted friend that can hold you accountable, someone can do some almost daily check-ins. Hey, man, I know you're struggling with this. So, and it's going to take you as the controller reaching out to a friend and say, hey, these are things I'm struggling with. I need help in this. Yes, I need the professional help, but I need you, an entrusted friend on a daily basis to do some check-ins with me. Hey, man, I know this is a struggle for you. How's this going? So I think, as we continue to kind of move through some of this stuff, man, I think getting other people to do life with you, come alongside you, speak into your life, I think is going to be huge. It's going to be so valuable for you in your progression of moving away from this controlling, mentality that you have.
Yeah, man, you hit some. I want to go back on something, just because I don't want to lose track of it in my mind. Which is easy to do. First and foremost, like you talked about, the importance of the marriage. The marriage is obviously at Rock Solid Families. We believe the marriage is very, very important. But when we are talking, we mentioned this in the last show in part 1, the marriage becomes secondary to the healing of the individuals. And so oftentimes you'll get pastors and preachers and stuff that will say, oh, you do whatever you can to save the marriage. You guys have to get marriage counseling. In abusive situations and heavily controlling situations, we do not go for marriage coaching. We go for self-healing first, okay? Because if I can't work on a marriage with 2 broken people. Yeah. I've got to get the individuals healthy. And this is why we do the physical separation if we have to, okay? Because the people have to be able to look in the mirror and know that they're healthy individually before they're even going to be able to invest back into this marriage if it's worth saving, okay? So, yes, the marriage is of utmost importance, but we can't allow, and this is what oftentimes controllers want to do, even after they admit that they have been guilty of some of these controlling issues, they'll admit it, and then they'll say, okay, so like let's start working on the marriage. Let's learn how to talk better and all this stuff. And it's too fast. It's too fast because of all the damage and trust breaking that has taken place over the years. That person that they've been hurting is not going to jump back into that marriage. Okay, they've already done it many times and it's failed. That's why they're so broken right now. It's not like this happened one time. And that's why they're like, I just can't do this any longer. So if there's going to be any restoration of the marriage, it has to be very clear that there has to be restoration and health for each individual, okay? And that's hard news.
Yeah.
That's hard news because people are like, I just want the marriage. Got to get healthy first. Okay.
Yeah.
Let's. I want to talk for a second, Kyle, about what is behind the controlling personality. What I see a lot in controlling personalities is they either isolate. In other words, they don't have any friends. They kind of stay and they keep their family protected into themselves, so they don't let the family go out or do anything, okay? Or they either isolate or they dominate. So if they are a social personality, any social circle that they get into, they have to dominate. They have to be the person that leads. They have to be the person that's in control. They have to be the person. And so you kind of see this two different things. If they're introverted people, they will just isolate and not get socially involved, all right? Or because they don't want people messing with them, right? But if they're that strong extrovert, whatever they get involved with, the next thing, they have to run. They have to have their say, okay? And so you have to kind of look at, okay, both of these are controlling personalities.
Sure.
Okay? But they look two very different ways,
Yeah.
all right, based on more personality type, okay? And so when it's an extreme, like when I have to totally isolate and like I can't be exposed to other people because I don't want other people telling me what to do, or when I have to be in charge of everything I'm involved with, what we see is that it is worth at least conversation of going back and looking at the controller's upbringing. Okay, now we're not back there to blame from the past, but it's very interesting to see how personality types get, I used the word before, they get fertilized, right? You get a personality type, and based off of your personality type and in the environment that you're in, it sort of exasperates it and blows it up. And so oftentimes these kids were abused as kids. So abusers or controllers, when I say abused as kids, they were overly controlled in some way. They had either a super domineering mom who basically dictated, and because they were a pleasing kind of kid, they just sort of cowed down and said, that's one lady I don't want to upset, okay? Or they had a dad who would come in and slam doors and everything, and they're like, I'm not getting in his way, okay? And there's we walk on the eggshells around this person. But you finally, after you have this upbringing, you get to this point where, usually when we come into our late teens or a young adult, where we say, I'm not dealing with this garbage anymore. And we separate from that person who is the controller. But because we have got these scars from being controlled, we double back down and say, no one will ever do that to me. And so we become the same thing that we just left. Because it tasted so bad growing up, I'm going to make sure it never happens to me. And so we actually kind of become what we experience. And so that's very common. And I bring this up because if you're going to help the controller or the abuser personality, it's good for them to have a connection to understand, like, well, what? Okay, yeah, I will admit that I've done some of this. Why have I practiced it so much? Why did I go down that road? How did I nurture something that was so poisonous?
Well, to your point, this is something, just hearing what you're saying, man. If you've recognized that you have these controlling natures and these personality traits in you. I think that this is where it is going to be a conscious decision in your mind, in the midst of conflicts, in the midst of times where there is that controlling, where you are controlling someone. It is going to have to be a conscious decision in your mind to not go down muscle memory, right? To not go down what you were taught, what your natural thing that you've learned, that you was fertilized at a young age. Man, it's going to have to be a conscious decision that you make in the midst of those conflicts, that I'm not going to do, because if you don't make a conscious, it's just going to be natural. It's going to go back to what you were taught, right? It's a learned behavior, and the only way to get out of a learned behavior is to relearn something. So again, moving through some of these things, kind of moving forward, the now what, man, you have to have those accountability parts. You have to seek out, coaches and counselors to come alongside you to relearn something that you've been dealing with for some of you guys out there for 40, 50, years of a behavior that you've done, that you were taught. You have to. It's going to take it's not going to be an overnight process. It's going to be a long process working through this. But man, I don't know a female out there that doesn't want to come alongside that journey with you. If you're willing to put forth the effort, man, again, it's worth the fight. Just what you're saying with perspective, obviously, right? You know, obviously, if you're willing to go through and try and fix a learned behavior that you've had for years and years and years, man, it's got to be worth coming alongside with that fight with you.
Yeah. So I think I want to touch on an idea here of nobody likes to see other people in pain. No normal, healthy person.
Right.
Okay, that we talked about. Those are sociopaths and everything else that somehow enjoy that. But most of us we end up saving, or we want to rescue people when they're in pain. Oh, man, whatever I can do to help. And part of the problem here is, if I'm an abusive type personality, and I've been doing that a lot, all right, and then when I finally start to realize my wife is going to leave me and things are falling apart, I'm now suffering a ton of pain. My world's crashing down on me. And then you'll have people that want to rescue the abuser or the controller. They'll want to rescue them because they hate to see that they're in this pain. And they'll rescue them by minimizing. No, it wasn't that bad. Hey, we all do it, and we minimize it. And it's like, no, here's key. I need that controller. I need that perpetrator. I need him to feel that pain. He's got to experience it. He's got to experience the pain. Do not try to rescue it, minimize it. Do not do anything to help them in terms of taking away the pain part. Let them feel that pain, because as much as it sucks, and that's the best word I can find right now, okay, as terrible as it feels, that pain is the motivating energy for true change. If I'm not doing well and my buddy says, hey, come on out, let's go have a few drinks, and next thing you know, we have a good time, and he takes away my pain, I really just lost all ambition and motivation to really make changes in who I am. I have to soak in the pain, okay? So don't save people from that. Let them experience it. And that's why, like, the physical separation, man, that is never easy, okay? That's a painful experience. But people have to be there. All right, and lots of growth can come out of that darkness.
Well, as you're speaking, Merle, if I go back to my paramedic training, we talk a lot about death, in the sense of we show up on a scene and we find someone who is dead, and we have to tell the family. And we talk a lot about the grieving process. And there's 5 stages of grief. And I think in a lot of ways, similar to abuse, we automatically jump to the physical abuse. I think a lot of ways, when it comes to this idea of grief, we automatically think there has to be a death involved. Man, grief and emotions that come along with grief, I think the same could be said about this idea of controlling and abuse. Man, there's going to be a grieving process for the abuser, for the controller. There has to be, similar to what you're saying. It has to hurt. It has to sting a little bit. Right. Man, if we look at the grieving process, there's 5 stages of grief, and I think we could each put ourselves in these. There's the initial denial. I'm not a controller, right? I don't deal with that. No, that's not me. And then once you start to get into and you start to move through the grieving process, and it's not just what we're talking about. As we progress and move through this, it's not a 5-step process, right? People jump into these different stages of grief at different times. The denial one, I think, is probably very early on. I'm not the controller that you say I am. And then there's the anger phase. And the anger phase, when it comes to this idea of control, this is where that idea of comes safety and making sure that your safety is of the utmost importance. But I also think if you start to early on, you're like, it's not me, and then all of a sudden something clicks and it's like, it is me. I think there's some anger within yourself. I'm mad that I let myself get to this place. Yeah. And then another step of the grieving process is the bargaining, where you're like, well, if she didn't do this, I wouldn't have to do this. And you start to try and justify things in your mind. And I think, again, these are healthy things. You have to go through these stages of grief to get to the ultimate acceptance, right? But before that, I think there is a stage of depression, anxiety, where you're like, holy cow, how did I get to this place? Right. Enough is enough. And then obviously, like I said before, the acceptance. So that's where it has to hurt a little bit. There has to be the sting, like, I did this to someone that I say I love, that I say that I'm committed to. I did this to that person. And man, that acceptance, I think some of the depression can kind of come back. Like, I can't believe I did this to you. but I also think it has to hurt, just like you were saying.
Yeah, I want to go back to the bargaining part that you talked about.
Yeah.
So oftentimes I can get, I'll just say guys for the sake of this conversation, I'll get guys that finally admit, yeah, okay, yeah, so I did do some of that, and so they feel very good about, okay, all right, I finally got this out, and I finally have come to an admission, all right?
Yeah.
But what happens then is as soon as they admit it, they don't want to go through that painful part of that depression and then that acceptance and all that, because that's where all the work has to take place.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
And so what they'll do is they'll start bargaining. How about, listen, how about you come back into the house and we live in separate rooms? How about that? Yeah. How about that? Right. And what they're doing is they're trying to minimize a lot of their pain. They see the pain train coming and they're trying to minimize it so they don't get hit by it. And then they have to realize that when they start bargaining, that automatically is a control reaction.
Yes.
Okay, and so that bargaining even is more salt in the wound for the victim. And so you can't get stuck in, and all the time I see women, they fall for it, okay? They're like, okay, I'll move back, but I'll just stay in this room and we'll only do this much of life together. And that lasts for all of about 30 seconds, okay? It just doesn't work. And so the abuser, controller cannot be in a bargaining position when we're talking about these types of things.
Yes.
Okay, so
agree.
let's just make that clear.
Yep.
And all right, so we've admitted guilt, all right, and we're no more excuses, and we're falling to our knees.
Yep.
Okay, and so all right, we feel like the brokenness is something I don't want to go through, but I know I have to go through. At this point, now we can start to set up a program of healing. And I want you to think of it almost more like an addiction, all right? Like with addiction, you have all these different things that come in. You have literally the habits of addiction, but you also have a lot of the chemistry of addiction, where the brain and the dopamine receptors are constantly being stimulated, and you have to basically fulfill that stimulation and to keep it going. And so the control is very much that same type of thing. Like, as long as I'm in control, I feel good, okay? And so I have to go through the whole idea. This is like, if I'm afraid of heights, each day I have to go a little bit higher on the ladder so I get more used to being uncomfortable. And so I have to set up a healing program where, okay, you're going to relinquish some control, all right? You're going to let that go. You're going to see how well you get through that. And you're going to see, oh, I lived. I didn't fall apart. It was okay to let the other person do this or to take control of this. It was okay. It worked.
Yeah.
Okay. And so that's why this is a healing program. How long does this take? Oh my gosh, I have no idea.
Yeah.
Okay. Nobody can tell you how long it takes, because not only are you trying to heal your issues of control, but if we're talking about trying to heal the marriage and the relationship, that person's trying to heal.
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
And so the idea that listen, we'll just talk nice to each other and be good to each other for the next 3 weeks, and then it'll all be good. Not a chance.
Yep.
Not a chance. So we're talking in the neighborhood of months and years. Okay.
Yep.
That doesn't mean we can't be in a level of relationship. Okay. But it has to be very, very safeguarded.
Yep.
It has to have its boundaries, and we have to allow each other to heal in the way that they have to heal.
Yeah, when you were speaking of that, Merle, that this idea of allowing the person who has been controlled, so in this instance, we'll just call them the victim, man, or your spouse. When you're talking about allowing them to go through their process of healthy healing as well, man, as someone, that if you've admitted that you have the controlling nature in you, man, this is going to be the hard one, because you have to allow that person to speak truth and not sugarcoat this stuff, because part of the healing process is getting it all out there, right? We have to allow each other to say our part, and this is something that I've learned really early on. This is one of my mentors told me this, that listening is going to be your greatest tool. You have to, if you are in the place where you're part of the healing process, you need to take an active role. But man, maybe your active role is just listening, because even if it is in front of a counselor or a coach, man, just listening and not putting your defenses up right away and trying to defend and try and bargaining your way through this, allowing the person who's been hurt to speak and allowing yourself to listen and let that sink in. Let the pain that you cause that person cause you pain, because that's, again, part of that healing process.
Yeah, and man, you just hit the nail on the head with that listening thing. And the idea here is when you listen, to truly hear them and let them know that you heard them versus having a reaction and a statement behind it. It really is all you have to say is, so I hear you saying.
Yep.
All right, and just let it hang there. Right, just repeat what you heard them say, and you don't have to have any reaction or input or your counter argument to it. Like that, that's back into your controlling nature.
Yep.
You surrender that.
Yep.
Okay, man, crazy good stuff there. So, let's talk a little bit about just the idea of daily habits. Okay, so I've gotten to this point now where I've admitted that I struggle with these controlling issues. And now I have to see, okay, so what are the things in all areas of my life where I have developed habits, patterns of living that reinforce this controlling nature, okay? And I have to study this a little bit. Like, I'm always the one that has to make sure this gets done. I'm always the one that does this. I'm always the one, and these things, again, they just fuel who I am. And it could be the negative, right?
Yeah.
So I have to identify these habits. And once I identify, I'll call them the hurtful habits, okay, I have to not just stop doing them, because we've talked about this before. It's really hard to stop a behavior. You have to replace a behavior.
Yes. Great
okay.
Point. Yep.
You have to replace it. And so, if you're smoking cigarettes, you can stop that. But if you don't replace it for at least for a while until you get into your new habit with chewing gum or meditating or running or something, you will get sucked right back into it, because it's the only thing you know to do in that situation. All right. So you have to start to build the new habits. So maybe I'm going to wake up in the morning and I'm going to make it a goal to start reading God's Word.
Yes.
I'm going to make it a goal to allow other people to say, hey, how about you decide where we're going to go to lunch today, right? And have no weigh in on it. I'm going to actually build a new habit, and I'm going to be conscious about it.
Yeah.
Right. This is very mechanical early on, because it's not natural to who you've developed over the years.
Yep. Yeah, I would say some of those daily habits, man, I would venture to say consistency is going to be a big habit that you're going to have to incorporate, because it's going to be one of those, because there are such deep scars potentially here. Man, the one time where you, again, we're flawed human beings. I'm not trying to say you have to be perfect in this, but I think just being consistent in this, whether that's being consistent in owning your part in the flaws, whether that's being consistent in when there is a disagreement, because it'd be silly to say that all of a sudden now you've established that there's this controlling aspect to your personality, that there will never be another disagreement. I think being consistent, the next time there's a disagreement with you and your spouse, let's do it in a healthy way. Let's set up those boundaries early on, so that way when those disagreements do happen, we know the way in which we can go and attack those. So whether that's, hey, in the midst of a disagreement, I'm going to need 10 minutes just to kind of step away from that. Yeah. But being consistent in that, so that way, because if you're not consistent, then your spouse, the one who has felt like they have lost that control, man, they're going to feel even more. It's going to almost doubling down on some of those scars. We did a whole show on scars before, where if one time you kind of step out of line, because we talk, the idea of that, trust is something that is built and earned, and it only takes one instance to lose that trust. I think the same can be said about this idea of when it comes to one time when you step in and try to take control of a situation, because it's a learned behavior that you've fallen into for years and years and years. Man, you're going to lose that faith in your spouse, man. She has to continue to trust that you're in this as well.
Yeah. Let's go to a major point. We see this in addiction and in 12-step programs, whether it's AA or Celebrate Recovery, which, by the way, Celebrate Recovery is an excellent program. If you've struggled with controlling issues, Celebrate Recovery is a great process to go through. Okay, so I would go contact my local church and ask, hey, where's their Celebrate Recovery program, and get into that, because they'll help you go through and align your struggles with that program of healing.
Yeah.
Okay. But with that being said, 12-step programs are based in, especially Celebrate Recovery, specific to God, Christian God. Okay. The idea here is, man, controlling personalities have a very difficult time submitting. And one of the practices here is, if you want to do yourself a big favor and your marriage a favor, you've got to learn to submit to God. This is where God comes in. In other words, He is the creator, not you. He's the ultimate controller, not you. And to start to understand your relationship with God, have you been trying to move God and put God where God should be? Yeah. Or are you allowing God to put you where you should be? Yeah. And so that whole connection of understanding, even if you weren't a religious person, so to speak, to understand like how little you really are, right? Like how little influence you really have, but to accept that, like, okay, it's okay, right? Like when a hurricane comes through, like I'm not much to put my hand up and stop the wind, okay? Yeah. And that's actually very humbling, but it also is the place where growth starts, because it allows me to say, God, I don't have a clue. Yeah. I don't know what's going to happen here, but I'm going to surrender it to you. Yeah. I'm going to submit it to you. And so that's what we're called to do in relationships, right? To like, listen, this is, and it's a back and forth. Yeah. It's a back and forth. You and I going back and forth, going, hey, you know what? You do your thing, I'll do my thing, but let's see how we do together. Back and forth, we give and take. So submitting yourself to God. I want to read. You probably have heard this before at many weddings, but it's worth reading because I think it has some powerful stuff in it. It's 1 Corinthians 13, 4 through 7. This is kind of called the love scripture, okay? Love is patient and kind. Love does not envy or boast. It is not arrogant or rude. It does not insist on its own way. Can I say that part again? It does not insist on its own way. It is not irritable or resentful. It does not rejoice at wrongdoing. In other words, calling out people's wrongs, but rejoices with the truth. Love bears all things, believes all things, hopes all things, endures all things. And I don't care how many times you've heard that, when you actually break it down, and sometimes, when you do that scripture, you'll say, okay, replace the word love with your name. All right, and read your name in the place of love, and see how that works. Yeah. Like, we all have a lot of growth to do.
Sure.
But I think that this passage really points out like something to strive for here.
Yep, man. As we can, kind of closing out this little 2-part series that we've been doing, something that kind of just last night in my small group, we were actually talking about this idea of submitting. And man, if there was a place to start as far as kind of a one thing to listen to as far as a takeaway from this show, I would say, man, last night in our small group, one of our guys was talking that work is crazy stressful right now in his life, and then he's like, and then my relationship with my girlfriend, it's kind of so whatever, and man, if I could just get my work schedule set, I feel like then I could have more time to spend with my girlfriend, and then I could have more time to spend in the Word. Like, I feel like sometimes I just have 30 minutes away from work and away from life, and I just want to turn everything off. And obviously, diving into God's Word, it requires me to turn things on. And one of the guys in our group called him out and said, hey, maybe you need to have priorities changed a little bit here. Like, yes, your work is important. I truly do feel God calls every man to go work. Whatever that looks like, whether it's for a paycheck or not, God calls men to work. But maybe we need to flip the script here and realize our priorities need to be God first. Then everything else will take care of itself. Is there still requirement, and God still requires us to work amongst that? Absolutely, 100%. There's still effort that you have to put forth. But man, when it comes to this idea of submitting to God, what a great place to start when it comes to this idea of controlling. If you find yourself in the controlling nature, man, take some time. Make sure that relationship is healthy. Make sure that relationship is in the order in which it has to be, because I truly do feel if you invite God into everything else you're dealing with, man, he's going to be there alongside you. Doesn't mean it's going to be easy. Doesn't mean it's going to be, there's going to be effort and there's going to be some pain that comes along with it. But man, the fact that you can submit to God and allow him to come in and radically change a situation, it has to start with that healthy relationship, that's submitting.
Yeah, that's where the understanding comes from of the relationships.
Yep.
All right, so hey, our challenge, whether you listen to today's show, and as Kyle, you just said, if it hit a nerve, it may have hit a nerve that you are the controlling person. It may have hit a nerve that you are the person being controlled. You're the victim. Mm-hmm. Okay, either way, because it's very real on both sides of this fence, okay? Either way, you've got to get help. Mm-hmm. Do not let this continue, because remember what we said about the people who are in these situations. They tend to move it to the next generation. Yeah. And so you wonder, why am I this way? Well, we look back in the old family tree and we see it grew earlier, well before you. And so do you want to pass this to the next generation? And so you must get help. It is your responsibility to yourself as well as the next generation to do something. And some of that can be hard and difficult, but the work is worth it. Let's do that now. If we can help you at Rock Solid Families, please reach out to us. Our phone number is 812-576-7625. You can reach us at rocksolidfamilies.org. If you want to do something more privately, like if you're like, I just don't want to contact Rock Solid because maybe they're in my neighborhood, I'll give you another website of a guy who's actually got some in-home or just online type programs and stuff like that, and he walks through this very well. It's chrismoles.org. So that's CHRISMOLES.org. Okay. And he's got lots of resources there where you can do online type stuff and walk through that. A lot of that is just stuff that we've talked about, but the idea of you just, and again, I don't want to say no to doing it that way, but you'll find you've got to have that accountability partner. You've got to have a coach. You've got to have a counselor. You've got to have somebody who can say, okay, let me talk truth to you here. Yeah. Right. So anyway, those are great resources.
Yep. Good deal, man. I hope you got. Thanks so much for sticking with us for these two-part series. Really do appreciate you guys, man. Thanks so much for Quality Auto Marts for coming alongside of us. Thanks so much for Casey's Outdoor Solutions. It continues to allow us to put out these shows. Reach out to us if there's shows you want us to tackle, topics. Man, give us a 5-star rating on all the platforms. Continue to tune in, subscribe to us on YouTube. Really do appreciate you guys out there. This is why we're doing what we do. Is to hopefully it lands well with you guys. Hopefully it starts a conversation. I know I've said it before. I'll say it again. Merle and I are not perfect. We never claim to be. We're just trying to figure.
Don't ask our wives. Yeah,
we're just trying to figure all this stuff out with you guys. But it's awesome to get to do it right alongside you guys. So yeah, man. I hope you guys are out there having a good week. Thanks so much, and go out there and be some strong dads.
Casey's is a premier garden center and gift shop located in Lawrenceburg, Indiana. Casey's offers a wide selection of plants, landscaping materials, home and garden decor, and gifts for every occasion. Casey's is committed to providing exceptional service, a unique shopping experience, and value to every customer. Stop in and see what makes Casey's so unique. Located at 21481 State Line Road, Lawrenceburg, Indiana, or call 812-537-3800. Let Casey's help you add beauty to your home.